Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry. Today's video is going to be a quick look at a preview we got today of a showcase comeback. Ieyasu and the Eastern Emissaries showcase is returning starting tomorrow, May 20th, the same day that we're getting our big Void Battle update with our 3 new Void Battles. This showcase will make a return and run concurrent to our Beauty in Motion showcase all the way up until the 27th. So there's a lot of things to think about here. First of all, this is really the first time we've had 2 proper showcases run alongside each other. The second thing is, this was really sprung on us as a surprise. We got What's Ahead for Dragalia Lost Part 4, where they mentioned things all the way out to mid-June. You would think they probably knew that Eastern Emissaries was coming back, so the cynic in me does think that this was dropped at such a last minute because they know this is such a high value showcase that people will probably want to pull for this anyway. And yeah, that's basically the last thing I want to say for this rerun. This is an extremely good summon showcase, and it's probably the best summon showcase we've had in the game, if I have to think back over the 7 months the game's been out so far. With the exception of different types of showcases like galas and dragon specials, as far as showcases who introduce new adventurers, this is probably one of the most impactful, and the new dragon on it is also one of the best in the game to this day. So the thing about this showcase is, there was a new mechanic called Bleed, and at the time, we really didn't know how bleeding worked. It was clear within a few days, but I'll link to my review at the end of this video and in the description if you want to take a look, as a lot of that still holds up, and I'll mostly talk about what's different. The big difference, I think, with Bleed now versus then is, it's very clear Bleed is not a normal affliction. Bleed is actually not an affliction at all. It's classified as a debuff, so even though it deals damage over time similar to burn, poison, and paralysis, it functions differently mechanically in that, unlike the other problems with afflictions I talked about in my past couple of videos with poison, paralysis, blindness, how bosses build up a tolerance or immunity to them, since Bleed is a debuff, it is not the case for Bleed. Bleed always has an 80% chance of being afflicted, or of working basically, on enemies when you're using it from an adventurer. And when you're using it from the dragon here, Marishi-ten, if she's max unbound, it has a 100% chance, and if she is in her base form, or anywhere between base and max unbound, it only has 90%. But that doesn't change over time throughout a match. That's a static and high percentage for a debuff that can be inflicted repeatedly. Furthermore, the damage from Bleed is way higher than any of the other debuffs, or the afflictions. Now, part of this is that there's currently a glitch with how Bleed works, and it always does a critical hit if you're not the host. So if you're joining a room and you're using Bleed, your Bleed will always do a critical hit. So any critical damage you have will make it much more powerful. But even without that glitch, this is still basically one of the strongest, it is the strongest damage over time effect, and really the only worthwhile or extremely powerful one in the game. So everything on the showcase, there are 3 adventurers, there's Ieyasu, Adis, and Sazanka, has the Bleed mechanic, and the dragon Marishi-ten does too. Last time around, there were 2 Wormprints on the showcase, so the absence of those just makes this look even better. And those were the only things that held the showcase back. When I first reviewed the showcase, I gave it a 7 out of 10, but on the basis of some of the Wormprints not being very good. Now that Wormprints aren't even in the summoning pool, that's no longer an issue, so this showcase is pretty much a 10 out of 10. Now, I will say there are a couple of considerations here, and one is, you can always wait until the last day of the showcase. We know that we're getting a flame raid next, Echoes of Antiquity, and none of these adventurers, the dragon, none of them are especially helpful for that type of content where you're facing off against a wind boss. You'll probably want flame adventurers for that, so if you're brand new, you could be better served waiting a little bit, at least so that you have more information on the 26th, right before the showcase ends. You get a preview of the next one, and you can decide which one you want to summon on. That being said, if you also are looking at this and you got a lot of the units, but say you only missed Ieyasu or you only missed Marishiten, there's another reason to consider waiting, and that is just, it is still hard to pull a specific 5-star adventure or specific 5-star dragon. You need tens of thousands of Wormite to be able to snipe with more than a 50% success rate. So if you're just gambling and planning on your 6,000 Wormite or 4 tenfolds to be able to get you what you want, sure, it may work some of the time, but it is certainly not a guarantee. So I really think this is best for people who were not around during New Year's, never got to participate in the showcase, you don't have any of the 4 stars or the 5 stars, in which case, yes, this is an extremely high value showcase. It is here as a temptation since we know we have that Flame Raid coming up. We're probably going to have a Gala showcase soon after that, maybe in the beginning of June, since those normally come out around every 2 months. And then we're probably going to have some more seasonal showcases for the summer. So I'm happy to see this return just because these characters are so meta-defining and so game-breaking in some ways with their bleed mechanic that it is good that more players have access to them and they're not gated behind one event. Unfortunately, it looks like the raid itself isn't coming back, so no sign of Botan, who was a 4-star welfare unit given out during that raid. I do think there's a possibility, though, that in the Wormprint shop, we will get the Wormprints from that event come back, and they're actually pretty decent, so I would suggest trying to pick up at least 1 copy of Heralds of Hinamoto, so you could max and bind it in the future with keys if you wish to do so. That provides skill damage and skill haste. Skill damage up to 30% and haste up to 6%. There's also the Wormprint Happy New Year that provides paralysis res and also provides some light res. It's okay. It's not necessarily the most desirable combination of abilities right now. It could be good in the future though, and because it's almost always better for practical purposes than Castaway's Journal, for a character like Botan who doesn't have 100% paralysis res, I would probably still consider picking one up, or even a couple, just because it's limited and you could want it in the future. The 4-star Wormprint from that banner was Hanatsuki Rally. It just has lost offense and critical rate, so it's really nothing to write home about. It does have some cute artwork of Luca and Yuden, but that's basically it as far as that banner goes. The featured 4-star dragon that time around was Silk, and if she's back, she's also a good 4-star dragon to have a raid up. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Eastern Emissaries. Like I said, I'll link to my past review video. The big changes since then are Wormprints aren't in the summoning pool, and we can equip 2 Wormprints, and we know how Bleed works, so everything I said about Bleed being good, basically about 10 times my expectations is how good it actually is, so amplify that appropriately. As far as the builds in that video, I looked over it, and there are a couple things I would tweak. If I had the chance to go back, I would say definitely now it's clear to me that skill damage is way better than some of the skill prep Wormprints I suggested for Adis and for Sazanka. My thinking at the time was you could only equip 1 Wormprint, and when characters didn't have multiple attacking skills, I like to use a more neutral Wormprint than use a skill damage one. Nowadays, though, I think it's pretty clear a lot of the skill damage you deal comes from your first skill since it charges so quickly, so not only that, but skill damage also affects the amount of damage over time that you're doing with your bleed. So those are some of the changes I would make. I would definitely suggest you put skill damage Wormprints on those adventurers now, whereas at the time I didn't know that that was the case. I also noticed that I mentioned Silk and Nidhogg for Sazanka, and I think I was just trying to give her a different build than I had for Ieyasu, where for Ieyasu I had Marishiten and Juggernaut as my picks. I would go back and change them to just be the same. I think they both just want as much strength as possible, and that would include the new dragon Nyarlathotep if that's what you have. But yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for this video, everyone. So thank you so much for watching. I'll go ahead and link to that past review. That's going to do it once again. Take care. I wish you luck if you decide to pull, and I'll see you next time.